Okay, so economists, they like to look at GDP and specifically GDP per capita as a measure of well-being. And so, we just think higher GDP is better. Higher GDP per capita is always better. But there are some legitimate concerns with it. And the first is that actually GDP doesn't really measure a lot of economic activity that takes place. So, for example, many developing countries, they have a very big informal economy. And also all economies around the world, they have something going on which is informal, like drugs, prostitution, gambling. There's a lot of economic activity for which people essentially pay some kind of a market price. They consume a final good, but it's illegal, but it still takes place. And it's difficult to measure these. There are some efforts to measure these, but it's difficult. Another aspect is environmental degradation. So let's assume we have somewhere a wildfire, and then we have to pay the firefighters in order to extinguish it, and then we have to build new homes. That all adds to GDP, and it suggests that the GDP is really high, but all we do is possibly cleaning up some damage. But cleaning up damage adds to GDP, and that may lead to the paradox result that actually a higher GDP is associated with a lesser quality of life. So let's say if an economy, all it produces is rebuilding homes every year from wildfires, and we compared it to an economy where everyone is living in a nice house and they don't have any wildfires, well, they have a much lower GDP, but they are probably overall happier. We also do not take into account household production. So if I clean, for example, my apartment today, that is some work, it's a service, but that's not taken into account in GDP. And of course, me cleaning up my apartment is maybe not the best example, but if you take a look at women who raise children, and it's still predominantly the women who do that, so that's a lot of work, but it's not captured anywhere in GDP. But it's also, of course, economic activity, and a very important one. Taking care of children is very important, but it's not taken into account either. And the quality of leisure, that's similar to what I said. Well, if you live in a country where you constantly have your house being burned down because of wildfires or other catastrophes, you don't have a high quality of leisure. And even if you live in a country that has a lower GDP, but you can hang out the entire day at the beach or on the mountain and either sail a boat or fly a kite or ski, even if you have less income, you may still prefer such a country. So GDP can be criticized as a measure of development, and of course there are alternative measures like the Human Development Index, which takes into account also things like life expectancy and levels of literacy in addition to just GDP. But it actually turns out that even alternative indicators, they generally correlate very highly with GDP. But at this point, what you should know is that GDP is a popular measure, it is widely used, but it is not a perfect measure.